Welcome to Loosen Up Your Painting podcast, the podcast with tips and advice on how to improve your painting. For beginners to advanced, you'll learn new ways to grow your painting fun and enjoyment. I'm Malcolm Dewey, your host from malcolmdeweyfineart.com, and let's begin. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Loosen Up Your Painting podcast. Really glad to be back and chatting to you again about painting. This is still an early part of the year 2018 and I'm really getting started. But I haven't been doing nothing either. It's been quite a busy and hectic start to the year involving a lot of changes in my studio and moving house and all sorts of traumatic stuff like that. So that's impacted on progress quite a bit. But at the end of 2017, after getting so many requests by artists to help them with acrylic painting, many artists wanted more advice on acrylic painting and how to approach it and whether they should even do acrylic painting in the first place. Eventually, I realized I had to address this missing part of my art teaching because I'm really focusing so much on oils. I set to work on preparing lessons on acrylic painting, which were intended to be part of my YouTube channel. I realized that there was a lot more to simply putting up a how-to video on using acrylics. The thing is that many beginners were looking at acrylics as really a save-all situation or a simple solution to painting, less problematic than oils, or so they believed anyway, a friendlier medium to use. But the thing I found with acrylics is that while they have advantages in some parts of the acrylic process, is perhaps less controversial than some of the substances used with oil painting, it still meant that you had to know the basics of painting. You have to know the fundamentals of painting and you have to know them quite well to paint good paintings with acrylics. Acrylics are not that easy. In fact, you have to approach them in a certain way and slightly differently to oils. Even if you can duplicate some of the results with oil painting by using acrylics, it still is a different process. And on top of that, you need to get the basics of painting sorted out as well. So with all of that in mind, I thought I'm not going to take a shortcut on this. I'm going to put together an entire course, one that would cover not only how I use acrylics, but also cover the basics of painting, get a foundation for good painting. I wanted a course that would also teach beginners how to paint well, not a course that was going to be as big as my flagship course, Learn to Paint with Impact. That is a much more in-depth course about the entire spectrum of painting and goes into it a lot more detail. But in this course, I cover the main bases as succinctly as possible and also including a workbook to explain concepts and help beginners work through that. Putting this all together obviously ended up taking quite a bit of time, and I worked on it throughout my December holidays. In January, feverishly putting together videos that I had done at the end of 2017 to illustrate the course. So eventually the course is done, it's complete, and you can find it on Udemy right now. It's called Acrylic Painting for Beginners, and quite straightforward and to the point there, I think. It's quite an exciting venture for me because not only am I dealing with a topic that a lot of my students wanted, but it also brought home to me the pleasure of working with acrylics and how I do change my painting somewhat when I'm working with acrylics. Also, it encouraged me to try other things. I've got demonstrations in there as well, ranging from a more traditional approach of landscape, getting a painting that is somewhat similar to one you could get with oils, and then moving through that into more expressive landscapes and also contemporary landscape, together with a still life painting in there as well. Using different mediums as well, I touch on that, and especially gel medium that I do use quite often. Other things as well that I show you how to set up your canvas panels, how to create a stay wet palette to help you with the key feature of acrylic paint, namely its quick drying. Generally, the main fundamentals of painting, that is values, color, and composition, I go into that, touching on the most important aspects, I think. Also, perspective and aerial perspective is covered. And as I mentioned, there is a downloadable workbook that's fully illustrated based on the course and with additional tips and advice as well. A little bit about my use of acrylics. I have probably used acrylics for the largest part of my painting life, starting out with acrylics in doing more graphic art, and then later on I branched into fine art, which also I used acrylics to begin with, but now a lot more in oil painting. I found myself in a period where I was working on another career, and I had given painting quite a long break, one of those life stages, and then came back into painting more actively. I chose acrylics to get back in touch with painting roots, get the fundamentals back into place again, get my confidence up really, because I knew that to go full-time painting professionally was also a confidence thing. So acrylics was a good way for me to get back into the painting life. I still use acrylics fairly often, especially in planning paintings. Sometimes I use acrylics as an underpainting and then go over it with oils and finish that off in oils as well. Sometimes I simply use acrylics for the pleasure of an acrylic painting. Acrylics have a certain difference to oils in the actual painting process as well, and that is in using layers. A lot of transparent layers are possible with acrylics, and you can push and pull the acrylic paint around with brush or palette knife much easier if you want more transparency, if you want to see the layers underneath. Oils being a lot more opaque. How I like to use this is to paint in thin layers, let the layers dry, which they do very quickly. I often put the canvas out in the sun for 10, 15, 20 minutes sometimes if it's a bit thicker in paint, and then go over it again with more layers straight out the tube or slightly mixed with other colors to retain the transparency. And even with a little bit of white paint in there, it's still, when it's thin, quite transparent. Unlike when you put in titanium white in your oil paints, that's it. It's very opaque. So I use that a lot. I also like to scrape in with the painting knife, get more texture that way. Whereas with oils, I prefer to use things like scumbling, going over with thickish oil paint over dried oil paint gives different effects as well. But with acrylics, scumbling is not so big, but getting texture in other ways, as I've described, with many layers and exposing under layers, is really exciting. Many people fall into the mistake of viewing acrylics as sort of a workhorse, but not as a serious collector's medium as well. But acrylic paint is now very much a mainstream medium, and collectors are paying really good prices for acrylic painting. Of course, acrylics also are the go-to medium for more contemporary or abstract painting, especially on a large scale. You can pour it on and work with it in a different way than what you do with oils. This is a generalization, of course. So anyway, the course is launched on Udemy. You can also find it on my website. There's a blog article as well, latest blog article in February about the course, and you can get the course for a nice discount, a launch discount, by visiting my blog and following the link there. So if you or you know someone who would be interested in learning these basics of acrylics and the basics of painting, then pass it along. So until next time, I just want to remind you that please ask me any questions you want on my website. Send me a contact message, email me, or message me as well on Facebook with any painting related questions that you may want me to cover, which I can discuss on the podcast and chat about. So just send me your questions, and I'll give you a shout out and chat about the painting problem and how we can deal with it. Okay, so we'll chat again soon, and until next time, cheers for now.